Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
In every humdrum life, there is a muse, someone who ignites inspiration. I had Sally Kirkland. Mom, you'd support me if I went for what I really want, right? I need to move to Hollywood.
Maybe you'll meet Reba McEntire.
I could meet Sally Kirkland.
Like that's gonna happen.
Do these photos mean these people ate here?
You mean Sally? She just left.
Excuse me, would you mind taking a photo of me and my paintings? Are you my new assistant?
Yes.
You start right now. In 1988, I was nominated for the Best Actress Oscar in the same category as Meryl Streep, and it's like I've been completely erased. Ask Ned if he'll hire me.
Sally? Sally Fields? Sally Struthers?
No, Kirkland.
You were in M.I.A, right?
That's Sally Kellerman.
Anna was the first independent film I ever saw. I love Anna because she's an underdog. Remember when I said I wanted to meet my favorite movie star? She's here and wants to talk to you.
She wants to talk to me?
God just brought us together. He is a mystical child of light.
Okay.
Sally, I want to get you out there again. Get you noticed. You're the reason I came to Hollywood. Come on, this can't be the worst movie you've ever done.
Who's there? In fact, it is.
Please, Xaque, you fix the faucet, now please fix the script.
You've done nothing but neglect me.
It's not the same business, Sally.
Ever want a real assistant's job? Give me a call.
You haven't changed.
Nothing good ever came from going online.
I don't know where I belong anymore. You came into my life and you brought me hope. Light of God!
Just because the rest of the world forgot about you doesn't mean I ever will.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really awesome guest. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Xaque Gruber, who is an award-winning filmmaker, a writer, an artist, most recently known as the writer and director of the hit independent film Sallywood, which is a really touching, funny, very deeply insightful look at Sally Kirkland's career as an actress, as well as current trials and tribulations, sort of navigating life and identity in the film industry. Through Sallywood, Xaque explores a wide range of themes, including ageism, resilience, the struggles faced by what's sort of called Hollywood's working class. Xaque's first TV writing credit actually came by reuniting the cast of his favorite 80s soap, Dynasty, for the 2006 CBS special. Then he's written for Spike TV, the Scream Awards, the World Music Awards for ABC, the Producer Guild of America Awards, many others. He's also written for both feature-length films, including M.I.A, Broken Roads, short films, including The Pistol and Laurel Casey, The Hurting Truth. Before he got involved in filmmaking, Xaque wrote for various outlets, including The Huffington Post, Hollywood Reporter, the Miami Herald, also worked in television, visual art, and education. He's also an accomplished author. He's got a a cool book called The Big Adventure in the Small State: A History of Rhode Island. Xaque has two masters. Went to Tufts, got a master's art and education, and then Boston University, where he did a master's in science and television production and writing. And Sallywood, which debuted back in November of 2024, is now going to be streaming released. I think coming up in a couple weeks now on Netflix and other sources. So a lot of really cool topics to get into today, and really honored to have him with us. Xaque Gruber, thank you so much for taking
Thank
time to
you.
the
What
show.
a great intro. I feel like
Yeah.
my whole life is flashing in all your words. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you've done quite a lot, and it's so interesting because in the film we get the one picture of sort of everything that happened in those couple of years, but you've done so much more. You're an artist, you're a writer, you've taught. Take a few minutes just to talk a little bit more about the stuff we didn't see in Sallywood, because you've done quite a bit, and love to hear sort of your background story as well.
Well, okay, so I mean, my really initial first love is art. And I left to my own devices, all I want to do all day is paint and draw and make art and read about art and look at art and talk to artists. And it's the core of everything. So everything kind of came out of that in some way. Teaching art was my first career. And like you said, I wrote and illustrated a book about Rhode Island history because I was living in Rhode Island and loving it, and just so fascinated with history in general. I my artwork is very illustrative. It has a lot of imagery, animals. It's not abstract art generally. It's much more like you feel like you can walk into this piece and you're in this kind of magical world. I love magical worlds. Yeah, teaching and then writing. A love for writing came out of a love for illustrating and reading also. I'm a great fan of reading everything. I'm always reading multiple books at the same time. So naturally, I was interested in writing at some point, and illustrating is tied in with that. I went to Pratt Institute for my undergraduate school in Brooklyn, New York, and my major there was drawing and also illustration. So I love, with illustration, you're really telling a story through imagery. And I guess that worked its way organically into filmmaking and storytelling with, films and writing films. And so basically everything I direct, I write. And I'm really interested in creating funny stories. I love comedy. I really am purely interested in making films that are comedic. Um, it's just, I love watching a movie with an audience and everyone's laughing and everyone's feeling it, I mean, you can put tons of drama and emotion in a comedy too, and it's still a comedy. And I grew up with so many great comedies, and they sort of made this lasting, lifelong impression on me that I want to jump in that swimming pool. I want to do that. I want to make that. And yeah, so I gravitate to that. Now in my own film watching, I love watching horror and drama and, documentaries and all sorts of serious subjects. But as far as making films go, I'm really drawn to comedy. And I love laughing. I love hearing people laugh. I love the moments where people just burst out laughing. It's just, it's the best.
Absolutely.
But it all started with art and with making art. And I'm still, you should see my art studio. I'm up in here in Maine. I have a house here on Sebago Lake in Maine, and it's so beautiful. And so I've turned my bottom level of my house into a giant art studio, which I'm continually cleaning because, when you're working, you're not paying attention to like tidiness. It's just a creative mad scientist laboratory down there. And I'm making all sorts of great stuff. I'm excited.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and of course we'll put the link to your personal web site in the show notes. But I was able to take a look at a lot of your pieces that you have up there, and they're all extremely impressive. So
oh wow, thank you. And watercolor is my favorite medium in general. So I love experimenting with watercolor in many creative and wild ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, but it's interesting because speaking about comedy and thinking back, because I have quite a few years on you. I my first sort of run-in with Sally Kirkland was in in the Goldie Hawn hit Private Benjamin, and I think even before that, I remember my parents taking me to the theater to see The Sting, actually, with Robert Redford and Paul
Wow.
Newman, where she
Wow.
shows up in that as well.
Sure does.
Sort of, the seminal event for you though was the 1987 independent comedy Anna, and
Yeah.
here she not just earns a Golden Globe Award for Best Actress, beats out, Meryl Streep and Glenn Close and Barbara Streisand and Faye Dunaway and other major names. Talk a little about, because this is, obviously a very seminal event. It shows up in the film. What did Anna mean to you? Talk a little bit sort of when you
Yeah.
first watched it, and because this really inspired what
Well, it
happened.
might have been the first independent film I ever saw. I
Okay.
remember seeing it in New York City where I was a student, and it was on the big screen there playing, and I fell in love with her performance as Anna and the movie itself, and the whole thing felt so gritty and real and raw and emotional. It has some really funny moments, but it's very poignant.
Yeah.
And I remember when she was nominated, I had a little tiny Oscar party in my dorm room at Pratt, and I had a little ballot that you could fill out. And I was watching it going, oh my God, Sally Kirkland, I hope she wins. I hope she wins. And like you said, she was up against really powerhouse household names. She was not the household name in that category. She was up against Glenn Close for Fatal Attraction, Meryl Streep, Holly Hunter, and Cher for
Okay.
Moonstruck, who ended up winning. And but even though Sally didn't win the Oscar, I was still fixated on her enough that I wanted to follow her through whatever movie she was going to put out and or TV shows or anything. So I followed her the best I could. But it's interesting with the fame game and just the whole entertainment, spiel, that sometimes your favorite stars become, you just see them less and less.
Mhm.
It's for many reasons maybe, but I remember by the time I moved to Los Angeles, over a decade later, um, she was seldom seen in films or TV. And someone asked me, well, who would you like to meet, in Los Angeles? What celebrity? And I said, Sally Kirkland. And they were just like looking at me saying, well, that seems pretty possible. And I said, it is like, and the wild thing is when I moved to LA, she was one of the very first people I meet and hired me on the spot to be her assistant. And I feel like I manifested this in some way. Like I had fantasized about meeting her, imagined what her life must be like, which I was completely wrong, by the way. And I am suddenly her assistant, like practically overnight, and managing everything in her world. She was exhibiting her art at the time in a gallery on Melrose Avenue in Los Angeles, and I was put in charge of the gallery. So I was running the gallery, I was walking her dog, I was in charge of, various aspects of her world. And that's all what the movie's about. It's all about my adventures with Sally Kirkland. Oh, my phone is ringing. I'm ignoring it because you're more important. So, yeah, but that could be Sally Kirkland, by the way. She calls me every day. And that's my life. Someone said to me, well, how long were you her assistant? I'm like, well, I think I still am. Like, I
Right.
don't ever ended, even though it was technically maybe a year or less. Um,
Right.
but no, once I'm your assistant, I'm always your assistant. And this is true with everyone I've assisted.
Right.
And
Right.
and Sally's not the only one I assisted. I went on from working for her to working for Henry Winkler and Michael Levitt. I also assisted for a while Tony Basil, who has a song in the film. Um,
Mhm.
and I assisted various other people. I wore so many hats in LA.
Right, right. It's interesting. In one of in sort of one of the scenes, following you, taking on this role as her assistant. There's sort of a very touching point where you're sort of walking along hand in hand, and she says to you, like, Zach, I don't know what happened to my career following Anna, and I'm thinking personally, again, I was a big Sally Kirkland fan also, and I think about sort of after Anna, there's sort of these three buckets, right? I mean, there was the major movies, the JFK and Bruce Almighty and all that stuff.
Mm.
She was in some niche stuff. You were talking about horror before. I'm a huge Dario Argento fan, so I
Oh, I
watched Two
just
Evil
watched
Eyes.
Suspiria last night for the 10th
Okay,
time.
okay, because she shows up in Two Evil Eyes, and
Yes,
then
she
there's the
does.
sort, this third category, I'm not sort of the sex symbol stuff of the 90s. There was a lot of times where like you'd put on the sort of the Showtime After Hours, and it wasn't
Exactly. She was
soft
on it.
porn or anything, but there was Sally Kirkland and she was naked or whatever.
Always
So okay,
naked.
you
Yeah.
know, um, I mean, what did you learn from? I mean, from when she, that point when she's talking about that. I mean, like, what happened to her career, saying that first decade or so after Anna? Because I mean, she did so much stuff
Well,
nonetheless. But what
listen,
happened?
this is the million-dollar question. Like, how can somebody who is on top of the world with an Oscar nomination, just won a Golden Globe and the Independent Spirit Award and all these critics awards, um, fade? How does that happen? Because you would think, oh, this is it. Now they're going to become, an A-list iconic person forevermore. But I think with Sally, she is at her core an independent spirit. It's perfect that she won that award. She doesn't play the game like everyone else does. So she was kind of unconventional in her choices. And when I say choices, I mean in every department. Like she, shortly after the Oscar nomination, she did a full nude centerfold in Playboy. And who does that right after
Right.
their big Oscar nomination? I don't think anyone ever has before or since. So, and she was the very first nude, fully nude American actress on the American stage. This is
Yeah.
1967 in a off-Broadway play called Sweet Eros. And
Yeah.
it was very wild, at the time, of course. She also started with Andy Warhol in the Factory, doing
Mhm.
his experimental films in the 60s. It doesn't get more like arty or odd than that in a way. And she may be the last living, as far as I know, or one of the very last living people from that group. She's so to start with that, I mean, in such an alternative way to start in Andy Warhol experimental films, it just kind of tells you where she's coming from, which is not the studio machine.
Right.
Even though she did that for a while, she was really super left of center. And most of her career has been independent film. Sallywood is an independent film, and Anna was an independent film, which really broke her huge. Um, and Sallywood, like Anna, these are not huge budget films, so she wasn't interested in being, maybe A-list forever. She was just more interested in being Sally Kirkland, which is, good for her. But there were, real high highs and ups and downs.
I appreciate sort of the full, history there, and taking it back, for those that may be less familiar with
Right,
again, the extent of what she's done, and
right.
how long she's been doing it. Zach, could you talk a little bit? I mean, obviously, in Sallywood, Sally Kirkland plays herself, but you have, a major list of um, folks in the film, from Eric Roberts, Keith Carradine, Jennifer Tilly, Marita Conchita Alonso. I mean, all major names. I mean, can you just talk a little bit about, when you're obviously independent filmmaker, not a huge budget, what goes into lining up some of these major names in a film like this?
Well, okay, so first of all, when I wrote Sallywood, I wanted Sally to play herself, obviously.
Mhm.
And so I basically wrote it for her. And I'd never made a movie before, so I really wasn't sure all the other pieces and how they were going to fall into place, because it is a puzzle. You're
Mhm.
putting together this giant jigsaw puzzle when you're making a movie. And Sally said yes. She read the script and she said, "You've written me as the world's greatest narcissist, and I can't wait to play myself that way." And I went, "Oh, okay, great. I've got Sally in. Now I've got to figure out everything else." And so I came in contact with Stephen J. Wolfe, who's the producer of the film.
Okay.
He's based in Los Angeles and has had a long career going back into the 80s of producing comedies, indie comedies. And I met with him and he liked the script and was interested. So he came aboard, and I was really thrilled when he came aboard because he produced 500 Days of Summer, which I loved,
Sure.
and other films that I'd seen over the years that I really enjoyed. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm working with a guy who really knows these ropes. And he has worked with such a huge array of people over the years that, and he's also a talent manager. So he reached out to a lot of different people in his Rolodex on his speed dial and sent
Hmm.
them the script, and they all liked it and wanted to participate. So, each day in the making of Sallywood, he'd say, uh, Keith Carradine is in, Eric Roberts is in, Jennifer Tilly said yes. And this is just, I feel like I'm living in this wild dream because this is quite a cast. I mean, I have four Oscar nominated actors in the film and one Oscar winner, and many other actors who are really well known, also like Kay Lenz, Maria Conchita Alonso, Lenny Von Dolen, Michael Lerner. This is his very final film. People will remember him from Elf, from The Postman Always Rings Twice. There's so many. I mean,
Sure.
these actors have been in the game for as long as practically I've been alive watching movies. So it's just such an enormous joy for my first feature that these people agreed to come onto set and play these parts and be directed by me
Yeah.
and play and read the lines written by me.
Yeah.
And that never gets old. That's a very exciting feeling as a filmmaker. And I also have a tremendous amount of up and coming talent in the film who, we went through all sorts of long process of auditions to find basically everybody who's on screen. And I love Tyler Steelman, who plays me. He's playing me. It's such a weird, crazy
All
thing
right.
because to me, he doesn't look like me. He doesn't act like me. And yet many people have seen the film and said, wow, he nailed you. He looks like you. He acts like you. I'm thinking, are we looking at the same film? But okay, you say so. Regardless, I love what he brought. And I love what Tom Connolly brings as Tom, his roommate. Um,
Hmm.
and the girls who played the porn star girlfriends of Tom,
Right.
uh, they're Nikki and Angeline. They're tremendous actresses, and the whole group. I mean, like everyone brought their A game, and I have to tell you, working with all these actors was the biggest joy in the whole process. They were just all of them terrific, just terrific. I mean, I couldn't feel more blessed.
Yeah. I can
It's a
imagine.
great feeling. If anyone ever tries to ask me like, well, is there behind the scenes dirt or behind the scenes like diva explosions? No, not from the actors. They were a joy.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because again, yeah, I mean, every scene, you're bumping into someone. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen. It's like one after the other, so it's impressive
And it's
again.
also a
And
movie about Hollywood and
right,
about, navigating the craziness of it all.
right,
So to have all of these well-known, recognizable faces in the film helps underscore that, that feeling of the industry.
yeah. Let's dive into some of those themes because again, while it is a comedy, you touch on some very important topics, both Hollywood and beyond. And I think one that is just front and center is this theme of ageism. We've talked a lot about it on other shows in different contexts, and then sort of this other piece of it, this sort of this forgotten class, which sort of ageism, but specifically focused on females in Hollywood and over a certain age. It's interesting because I saw that you were at in one of the film festivals in LA. I think January of this year. There was a counter ageism program that you're involved
Yes.
in,
And
and you
we
say
were
this.
chosen for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
there's
that's
there's a quote where you're like, I hope my story with Sally touches audiences with a message of how, with true friendship, there can be a path to success no matter at what age. And I think that's a very interesting balance that you strike there in terms of, we forget about the importance of relationships and intergenerational relationships. I wonder if you could take a little time, Xaque, and talk about these two themes, because I think they're really important. And the way you put it together was quite elegant.
Yeah, I feel like what you've just said is the heart of Sallywood, which is multi-generational friendships. The story of friendships. Forget about sex, forget about all the sensational stuff you can throw into a movie. I'm interested in exploring human friendships and human connection between people. It's very exciting if you have characters of very different generations coming together because basically, I think because of technology, among other things, there's this age divide. And the older the person is, the less they're part of the same world as the 20 somethings and the teens. Yeah, I mean, the people like I have nephews, one nephew, he's 16. I can't even imagine what that adult world is going to look like for him my age because just everything just rapidly changes so much. And Sally Kirkland, who's cut from a cloth going back to the 60s and before, she's, wrestling with ageism, which is, I feel like, the last accepted prejudice in our world right now. I mean, we have, called out all these other prejudices, being prejudiced against gay people, against black people, against any kind of, person that isn't whatever is the norm. And, there's been all these movements to bring a spotlight to that. And somehow ageism is still rampant and barely talked about. And it's very real in every industry. It's not just entertainment industry. So, at a certain point, as the younger guard starts becoming the hiring force, the people over a certain age are seeming less and less desirable. And it's really a shame because I think the older people are where it's at. I think they have the most interesting stories, the greatest sense of humor. They have this enormous, variety of perspectives. They've lived through so much. And so inherently, they have so much to offer and say. And, anyone who says, you're over 40, you're no longer sexy. Well, maybe that's a 20-year-old saying that. I don't know. But it's completely not true. And I love working with older people, no matter what I'm doing, and I have worked with most of my friends are older than me. I've always made my own soul. But yeah, I feel like this movie really does tackle that theme in a sensitive, realistic, and emotional way, while still being a comedy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a related theme, which I also think you tackle really well, is this sort of principle of the fact that this Hollywood, I'll call it Hollywood working class exists. About a year or so ago, I hosted Bob Beecher here on the show, who is the president of the Motion Picture and Television Fund, which basically, it was set up by Charlie Chaplin and some other folks like 100 years ago to think about sort of financial assistance and health, social services around not just aging actors and actresses, but just everyone else that works in Hollywood. Not everyone that works in Hollywood makes $20 million a film and lives in the Hollywood Hills and
very
500-room mansion and all that stuff. And
very few do.
Again, I wonder if you could talk a bit about this because these themes also come into play, in the film, and I think you deal with.
Well, yeah, and actually with Sally, we see in this film that at one point she can't even afford, a magazine at the grocery store or the market. So there's, just because you've been nominated for a big award or you've been a celebrity at some point, she says in the film, kind of near the beginning of the film, she goes, "What's the best thing about being famous?" I mean, I was famous. I've been famous in my life. And I thought, oh, that's such an interesting concept that you were famous in your life, but now not so much. Well, generally speaking, not always, but with great fame can come great money.
Yeah.
But that may not last. And, actually, the reality is right now we have a GoFundMe for Sally. She's had some very bad
Yeah.
times with health this past year, and she's been through a series of different broken bones and infections, and the medical bills are enormous. And her income is the medical bills are this big, and her income is this big. So we've put together GoFundMe, which maybe you could put a link on to this
We
interview
will.
where
We
people
will.
donate. And I put it on my Facebook yesterday. I really want to help her. Of course, I want to help her. I made a movie about helping her. I'm passionate about helping all my friends, really. So I want to, and she kind of gave me my first big memorable experience in Hollywood. Um, I ended up really taking good care of her. It's funny because she's the older one, so you would think she's the one taking care of me, but I was really taking care of her in so many ways, and
Yeah.
still am.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No,
this is your question.
yeah, no, it's spot on, and again, it's that the beautiful relationship. Again, when we talk about the intergenerational connection, the importance of the human connection, and then sort of what comes out of that, and I think this general principle of resilience, of the ability to bounce back, and Sally Kirkland is somebody that at different phases, again, of her career has bounced back. I mean, if it's anything from the breast implant stuff that she was involved
Right,
in back in the
right.
90s.
Yeah.
I know she's a spiritual minister, and now she's
Yes.
she teaches art. I mean, you ran into her in the art gallery, but she has taught Sandra Bullock and Liza
Oh
Minnelli, and
yeah. Oh
uh,
yeah.
talk about that a bit, because I think
She
just the
gave
story
a
of
lot of people their
resilience.
start,
Yeah.
actually. It's a sort of a little known fact, but I mean, she taught Barbara Streisand and Liza Minnelli acting on how to cry on cue. She kind of helped usher in Sandra Bullock, Kathy Griffin, and all of these people have acknowledged her in their various books and blogs and things. Um, Bill Paxton. The list is long. John Corbett.
Mhm.
Um, so many people, like over the years. I even remember laying on her bed.
Yeah,
She always
I like
wants
that
everyone
scene.
laying on her
Yeah.
bed. Laying on her bed is a normal part of knowing Sally. With all of her acting students, some of which were starring on big hit shows. This was, maybe 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago. And we would gather together on her giant bed, which is prominently seen in the film, watching on her TV the show that her acting student is in.
Ah,
And yeah, a wild array of people have been through Sally Kirkland's acting classes, and she's played a huge part in a lot of people's careers. So, I feel really great about being able to share this movie with the world because it's about to get distribution now. And, to bring to light this great talent who uh, I feel like deserves a little more attention.
yeah.
Hmm.
So speaking of that, I mentioned at the beginning, it was, it's coming up in terms of the streaming release. What should we be on the lookout for in regard to that? I mean, what is that? What does that mean? Explain. Obviously, I understand what streaming is, and I'll find there'll be Sallywood on Netflix and all that. But what accompanies that in terms of that launch, and in comparison to the traditional release that was done last year? What's going to be
Yeah.
happening? Is that going to in the
Yeah.
coming months?
Well, we are still going to have a limited theatrical release.
Mhm.
We're going to be playing in cinemas. I'm just getting this information now, so it's sort of breaking news every day. But, certain cinemas in California, certain ones in Florida. The streaming release is going to be on Amazon Prime, Tubi. There's something called Plex. There's
Yeah.
all these streamers out there that I'm learning as I go. This is my first feature film. So I've not gone through this whole distribution process before, and I'm getting these emails from the distributor Buffalo 8, which are very complex with all these different things of social media and how to post and when to post and here and it's a wild process, Ira, making a film because first you have it living up here. It's just in my head. And people are like, well, it's an idea. You haven't written it down yet. Then you write it and you share the script. And then that's a whole chapter. And then you finally find the funding. It's just kind of through the miracle of whatever. And you find the funding to make this film. And then you go into pre-production, then production, then you have post-production, which in my case, the pandemic hit right as we were going into post-production, which was extremely frustrating because
Okay.
everything was slowed to a snail crawl. And we were really, when we were kind of moving fast, suddenly we were not moving. And then we were moving very, very slow. And it took a few years, and we finally got to the point where the score was done, the licensing was done. There's a lot of clips in the movie,
Hmm.
photographs and videos that Sally's looking at through the years, which every single one of those things had to be licensed, and you have to get approval to use. There's songs by Rufus Wainwright in the film and other musicians, Smokey Miles, Tony Basil. It's very cool to have all these people involved, but there's all sorts of legal that goes with that. So it's a long process to finally get to the point where, oh my gosh, now we have distribution. And at any point in this process of making a movie, everything could go awry. And
Mm.
sometimes it does go terribly awry, and then you have to get it back on track, like getting a train back on its tracks. And so, I wish I could tell you a year from now all the great, exciting stuff that's happened as a result of Sallywood being released. But right now, I'm just full of hope and joy that very soon it's going to be available in millions of people's homes and people can watch it in any number of ways. So this is a very cool thing
Hmm.
because I mean, I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not 30 anymore. I'm not 40 anymore. And this is my first rodeo, as they say. So
Yeah.
you can sort of reinvent, yourself. I'm now a filmmaker. It feels like in any decade of your life.
Yeah. Well, no, it must be extremely exciting, and again, I very much enjoyed the film. I look forward to being out there so I can recommend to all my friends to watch it. But yeah, it's such an impressive story, Zach,
Thank
and
you. The
you
audiences
know,
have loved it, and I'm just so thrilled with the response, and people really, really loving it. It's just the best feeling.
yeah, that's great. It's like one last thing while I have you today. I mean, obviously, this is one part, I mean, a major part of your world, but you do a lot of other stuff right now. As you know, just when I was reading before, you have some writing workshops coming up. I think a paint workshop at the Vero
Always,
Beach Museum of Art. You're all over the
always.
place. What should we be on the lookout for in terms of you over the coming months and as we get into 2026?
Yeah, yeah.
Anything I didn't touch on, please?
Well, I really am doing so many things all the time. And like you said, I have always on the horizon painting workshops coming up. I love teaching art to people. I started teaching art. My very first experience was teaching 3-year-olds in Brooklyn, New York. And from there, I went into teaching, high school, elementary school, junior high, adults. I teach inmates at the Florida jails. I
Mm,
teach Alzheimer's in the memory care centers. I
nice.
teach assisted living, in retirement communities, and you name it. I love teaching people art and writing. I teach writing workshops all through the year. Um, I think, if I have a New Year's resolution for the new year is I really want to keep my website, which is xaqegruber.com. I want to be posting regularly on there because there's so much going on month to month all the time with teaching and going to doing events, hosting events. Um, And, you know, I have more films in me too. I'm enjoying this process so much. And art exhibits that I'm part of. You know, I'm such a creative soul. I love feeling creative and making stuff. And even in my head right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm writing songs. I'm writing movies. You know, I know it seems really quiet here in my living room in Maine, but it's never quiet in my mind. It's just this explosion of creativity all the time. And it's great. I'm a very happy soul.
Well, I'm happy for you. I'm excited for what comes next. And again, it was a very impressive debut. We will of course put the link to Sallywood in the show notes. But again, for everyone out there that's going to be listening to this episode across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been spending time with Xaque Gruber, filmmaker, writer, artist extraordinaire, xaqegruber.com. We'll also put a link to that in the show notes. But Xaque, I just really want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to come talk to us for a little while about everything you've been doing. It's very impressive, and I look forward
Thank you, Ira.
to seeing what happens next. And it was really great, talking with you.
So great talking to you. There's nowhere I'd rather be than talking to you right now. Thank you. I really appreciate you.
Awesome time.